Hello, everybody. This is William Dakota Compton here, and I am running to represent Kentucky's 2nd Congressional District. Now, this video today I am making because there was a town hall last Sunday here in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And this town hall was put on by an amazing group of people who wanted to ask our current representative, Brett Guthrie, why he has voted the way he has voted and what his plans are to make the 2nd Congressional District a better district moving forward, especially with everything going on in the current administration. People wanted to find out what our representative was thinking. And shocker to no one, he did not show up, which left many of our residents voicing their concerns and their questions to a group of like-minded individuals on stage who were standing in for Representative Guthrie. And those people did an amazing job presenting facts and statistics. But I wanted to take the time to answer each question because I am running to do what Brett Guthrie has not done before. And that's listen to the people, have conversations with the people, and fight to make this district a better place. So without further ado, here are some of the questions that were asked at this town hall, and here's how I would answer them. So here is the first question. How do you justify severe cuts to Medicaid? If cut, what would you put in its place? Why do you support the tax cuts for the wealthy? So, a very heavy issue right here. So, the first one, Medicaid. How do you justify severe cuts to Medicaid? Personally, I don't. I cannot find a single reason to justify the $880 billion cuts to Medicaid that Representative Brett Guthrie is in charge for by being the chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee. There is no justification whatsoever for these cuts. Now, I wanted to share some facts with you about Medicaid in the state of Kentucky. In the 2nd Congressional District, there are 234,382 people who are covered by Medicaid, or 30.7% of our population. Out of those, 96,214 are children who rely on the CHIPS portion of Medicaid. Medicaid covers 44% of Kentucky births. Okay. Older people use Medicaid to supplement the health insurance because of their low incomes. 16,650 of the 21,050 long-term care residents rely on Medicaid, or 1 in 5 seniors. So Medicaid provides home and community-based care for 31,300 Kentuckians with developmental disabilities, brain injuries, and requiring machines to live. And it ensures 250,000 of the lowest wage workers in the state of Kentucky. And Medicaid is one of the single largest employers in the state of Kentucky. And I'll tell you, in my county, I live in Warren County, and this is where this took place. 32.8%, or 46,687 people in Warren County alone rely on Medicaid. Okay. How do you justify severe cuts to Medicaid? You can't. Cutting Medicaid hurts the people in our congressional district, our state, and our nation. It is unjustifiable, it is inhumane, and it is absolutely despicable that Representative Guthrie wants to cut so much from this program that helps so many. To the second part of this question, if cut, what would you put in its place? Honestly, I support a single-payer Medicare for all system. Okay, I believe everyone should have access to high-quality health care that is not reliant on their job. Okay, I believe healthcare is a human right, and everyone should have access to that. Whether you're in the hollers of Eastern Kentucky, whether you're in the city of Louisville, in Lexington, or whether you're out in some other state, I believe as an American citizen, you should have access to healthcare. So I would put a single payer Medicare for all system in place. That's what I would support. And then to the third question, why do you support tax cuts for the wealthy? And obviously, these were supporting, or questions were towards Brett Guthrie. Me, I don't support tax cuts for the wealthy. In fact, I believe our tax system is flipped. I believe that the top 1% need to pay their fair share in taxes, not making the lower wage workers pay more in taxes than Elon Musk has paid is absolutely, again, despicable. I believe that we need to implement a wealth tax. The more money you make, the more you contribute and help our country. So I do not support tax cuts for the wealthy. I believe that we should flip the tax system and we should give tax cuts to the working class people of our nation. That's what I believe in. So, great question, and you can tell that this was a very heavy one. So, thank you to the person who submitted that question. All right. The next question. Over 80,000 Veterans Affairs jobs have been or are in the plan to be cut. What is your take on these cuts, and how do you support our veterans? So again, these cuts to the Veterans Affairs is awful. I believe that if you are a veteran and you serve our nation, you put your life on the line for our nation, then when you come back here for wherever you served, we should be able to lift you up. You put your life on the line, let's make sure to take care of you. And so let me talk about a little bit about these cuts to the VA. Let me talk about how they're going to hurt our veterans. So the VA reported 2,959 severe occupational staffing shortages in 2024 at the Veterans Health Administration facilities. And we fired more. These firings will force our veterans to wait longer to see healthcare providers, have disability claims adjudicated, have someone pick up calls at the Veterans Crisis Line. And let me say that one again. Veterans are going to have to wait longer to have someone pick up calls at the Veterans Crisis Line. So if we have a veteran who is suffering from PTSD and is contemplating taking their lives, they will have to wait longer when they call the Veterans Crisis Line in order to be talked off that ledge. They will have to wait longer to have burial and funeral expense reimbursement requests processed. And then on top of this, in the continuing resolution bill that was just passed that Representative Guthrie voted for, they made sure to zero out the funds for the PACT Act. Now, if you don't know, the PACT Act, which during the first iteration Guthrie voted against, but then he voted for, I will give him credit for voting for it in the end. The PACT Act gave funds to our veterans who suffered injuries due to chemicals. Okay, so think about Agent Orange. Okay, and think about burns from serving overseas. Okay, this PACT Act was helping to bring healthcare to our veterans. Okay, they made sure in this continuing resolution to zero out those funds that will help bring healthcare for those veterans. And I'll just tell you this, my great uncle, when he came back from war, he was affected by Agent Orange. He could not even wash dishes, his own dishes, without breaking out in blisters because of Agent Orange. And knowing that our representative voted to get rid of funds that would have helped him have health care when he was still alive is deeply troubling to me. He suffered before he passed away because of Agent Orange, and the PACT Act would have helped provided health care for him. Okay? These cuts are awful. These cuts hurt, again, the people who put their life on the line for our country. And to have a veteran who is elected to represent us in the 2nd Congressional District, it is a complete betrayal of trust, knowing that Representative Guthrie has not done anything to stop these VA cuts and has supported these cuts to veterans' health care time and time again. So, what is my take on these cuts? They're awful. They're horrendous. We should not be cutting from the VA hospitals. We should not be cutting from them. And how do I support our veterans? I will stand up and I will fight to make sure they have what they need because they stood and fought for our freedoms in this country. And that includes health care. That includes transportation to see that health care. That includes having everything they need to have an affordable job when they come back into America. Everything they need, I will make sure to stand up and fight for them. That is how I will support our veterans. Very heavy issue right there. I'm glad that person asked that. All right. Question number 3. How can we justify passing budgets that help the top 1%, but the same budgets hurt those that need the most help? We can't. We can't justify passing those budgets that help those who are already at the top. We can't justify those budgets, folks. We need to fix our budgets to where they are helping the everyday citizens in our nation, the ones who are struggling to put food on the table for their family, but they are working 2 or 3 or 4 jobs just to make ends meet. We need budgets that make sure that the ones who are making the decisions between having a roof over their head or getting their life-saving medicine, we should be making budgets to make sure that people don't have to have those decisions. We are in the most wealthy nation in the world. Why can't we help the working class people of our nation? And why are we hurting them? Why are we helping out those who have already reached the top? So no, we cannot justify passing these budgets. We need someone who is going to stand up and make a change. It is not going to be Representative Guthrie because he has supported these budgets time and time again. So another good question. And unlike other politicians, I just like to answer a question and keep rolling. So we're just going to keep on rolling. So this one hits a little bit home to me. Why is Guthrie against student loan forgiveness, but he took out over $4.4 million in PPP loans? Now, if you don't know, the PPP loans happened during COVID. And so the PPP loans were for businesses to ensure that they kept operating during COVID, okay? Before COVID, in fact, in 2018, Representative Guthrie actually spoke in an article in one of Owensboro's newspapers. And he said one of the most pressing issues that he is going to focus on is fixing the student loan crisis that we are seeing in our nation. And then COVID happened. He got one of the largest loans for his company, his family's company, Trace Diecast, 4.4 million in PPP loans. And then he turned around and voted to make sure that all of those loans were forgiven. $4.4 million forgiven. Do you know who paid for those loans? You and I, our taxpayers, paid for those loans. And I have spoken with small businesses all across the 2nd Congressional District. Businesses that have did apply for those loans during COVID. Businesses that were denied those loans, that they weren't even asking for much, just enough to scrape by. And they were denied these PPP loans. And they had to shut down either for an extended point of time or, as most of them has told me, completely shut down because they couldn't make ends meet during COVID. And yet our representative made sure that they took $4.4 million. And then student loans, and I know this is a hot topic issue. I have student loans myself. I've been paying on my student loans since 2016. And I know that there are many of them. A young lady who was at the town hall Saturday, she has been paying on them for over 16 years. And her student loan balance has barely changed. Student loan forgiveness is not essentially letting students go to college for free and not paying their debt, which, I mean, I do support making sure that we have access to affordable higher education, but it's not making sure they don't pay their debt. It's eliminating this predatory system with interest rates that are so high, no one can pay them back, or it takes your entire lifetime to pay them back. And Representative Guthrie was completely against $10,000 loan forgiveness programs for our students. Again, all the while, he had $4.4 million forgiven for a loan that you and I paid for. Okay. I can't tell you why he is against student loan forgiveness, but I'll tell you this. I fully support it. I fully support it because our students that are coming out of college have faced a predatory system that we need to address. And it is hypocrisy to the highest standard, knowing that he is against people having $10,000 student loans forgiven when he had 4.4 million. So again, a very good question, and I appreciate the person who asked that. This question, a simple question, the first one. Who won the presidential election in 2020? Well, it was obviously Joe Biden. If you say anybody else, then you're not living in reality. Joe Biden won the presidential election in 2020. He served for 4 years. If you say anybody else, you're not living in reality, friends. Okay. Do you support Trump's pardons? No, I do not. Trump's pardons, he has pardoned people who have went out and reoffended so quickly. We are seeing it left and right. I don't support Trump pardoning criminals, especially people who engaged in insurrection at our Capitol. I don't support them. It was a wrong move by Trump. And again, it's awful. Another awful thing that has occurred, and I don't support them. Okay. Awesome, awesome questions. This one, I know this is another big topic issue. Do you believe that Putin invaded Ukraine? Yes, Putin invaded Ukraine. And I will tell you this right now, I support Ukraine because I believe that if Russia takes over Ukraine in this war that Putin started, I believe that he is not going to stop there. Innocent people have been murdered by Vladimir Putin. And I remember a time growing up when the adults in my life would look at me and would tell me that they would stand up against what Putin is doing right now. And the fact that we have people in our Congress who are not doing that goes against every single American belief that I grew up learning. We are supposed to fight for democracy, fight for the good of the people in America and the world. That was always what was taught to me growing up. And then we see Vladimir Putin invade Ukraine. He invaded them. We need to support Ukraine. And I will give Representative Guthrie this. He has voted to make sure that they had funding when it came up. I do appreciate him. I will give him a win right there. But now that it's not politically savvy in his party to support Ukraine, he's been silent. We don't need people who are silent on these issues, especially when what's at stake is so high right now. So yes, Putin invaded Ukraine. And I support Ukraine, and I believe that we need to do everything we can to push back against the dictator known as Vladimir Putin. Okay, next question. All right. This question comes from a vote that happened a couple years ago. Why did you, asking Representative Guthrie, not support the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act? So, if you don't know, the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act was a piece of legislation that ensured there was funding that went out across the United States to places that supported domestic violence victims. And now, this particular piece of legislation that was voted on actually was voted on weeks after we saw a very tragic incident happen in Kentucky where a young woman was brutally murdered in a domestic violence case by her boyfriend. And Representative Guthrie voted against this piece of legislation that will ensure that women have the ability to go to places to get out of domestic violence situations and to have the resources to do that. He voted against this piece of legislation. Okay. And I do want to tell a little bit of a personal story. So growing up, before my mother and father did not get married until I was in elementary school. And so there was a time where my mother was in a relationship and my father was in a different relationship. And I was living with my mother at the time. And I'll just tell you, I have firsthand seen what happens in situations with domestic violence. I lived in those situations with my mother. I never want to see anyone put in those situations because what I saw that occurred to her was beyond anything I can describe as a human. It was such an awful experience, and I never want a female or anyone to go through that situation that I witnessed. And so by not supporting legislation that will provide resources for women to get out of those situations, it just hurts deep inside. I've seen what can happen. We've seen on the news what can happen. And Representative Guthrie voted to make sure that funds were not available to help those women who needed it the most. What kind of person does that? Truly, what kind of person does that? Okay. All right. On to the next question. Do you support layoffs in the National Park Service? No, I do not support layoffs in the National Park Service. In fact, with the 2nd Congressional District having Mammoth Cave, the longest cave system in the world, we should be doing everything we can to support our national parks. With the national parks, they actually generate revenue for our area, local economies, tourist attractions. People come from all over the world to see Mammoth Cave National Park. And then to see them cutting people from the workforce, people who just want to be around nature, people who love doing what they do in our national park services, and they're wanting to cut their jobs. No, I don't support it. We need to be doing everything we can to support the people in the national park services and promoting them. They're natural resources. They provide economic revenue to our congressional district. Why would we cut off support for that by cutting people out? So I don't support these layoffs. And it is so sad seeing Representative Guthrie being silent when people in his congressional district are being fired from our national parks. Okay. Social Security. What is the end game for Social Security by the Trump administration? Well, I can't speak for Representative Guthrie, but I can tell you what I think the end game is. I think the end game for Social Security by the Trump administration is to completely wipe it out, to get rid of it, and make our older Kentuckians work until the day that they die. That's what I think the end game is. Okay? But let me give you some information about Social Security. So, 99% or over 70 million Americans are getting Social Security checks. Okay? So with Social Security, the biggest thing that has been talked about is Trump has mentioned, we found people who are over 120, 50, over 150, over 200, over 300 getting Social Security checks. Well, I'm here to tell you that's not true. That's false. Here's why. When someone passes away, funeral directors fill out a form that's called SSA 721. It is a form that is filled out by funeral directors that is sent to the Social Security Administration to stop all payments for that person. Okay? On top of that, the current system automatically stops payments to those people whose age in their system reaches 115 years old. Once you reach 115 years old in their systems, they stop your payments. Okay? And then once you hit 90, the Social Security Administration checks up on you frequently to make sure that you're still alive. So no one is getting payments from Social Security that are 200 years old. That's not happening. That's not. Now, what I will say is yes, they probably should go back through and the people's names who are in there that are like 200 years old, 250 years old, they might need to clean them out a little, do some administrative cleaning, getting their names out of the system. But they're not getting checks, folks. They're not. That's not happening. And the sad thing is, we have seen Representative Guthrie time and time again when it comes to Social Security support things like cutting Social Security benefits, things like raising the retirement age to get your Social Security benefits. And all of it comes to the idea that Representative Guthrie and many Republicans think that if you cut the number of people getting Social Security payments, then it's going to help make the system more solvent. Well, I'll just tell you this: Americans are paying into their system, they're paying their money into the system. It is our money that we're paying into it, it is ours. Keeping it from us should not be a thing. Okay. And so I want to leave this with a quote that I found. Okay. I'll tell you who it is once I read it. Social Security has nothing to do with the national deficit. Social Security is totally funded by the payroll tax levied on employer and employee. If you reduce the outflow of Social Security, it wouldn't go into the general fund. So Social Security has nothing to do with balancing a budget. Ronald Reagan said that when he ran for president. Ronald Reagan. So this idea that many Republicans have that cutting Social Security payments will help the national budget, it doesn't. Social Security is self-funded. Okay? No one is getting payments for 200, 300-year-olds. It's not happening. And so my take on this is simple. We need to make sure to keep strengthening Social Security because that's funds that working Americans, working Kentuckians has paid into our Social Security system. It is their funds. It is their retirement. Keeping people away from their retirement is a big no for me. And it's sad that Representative Guthrie wants to do just that. All right. If the Department of Education is eliminated, how will you ensure funds that schools need to survive are still sent to these schools? So again, another question that hits home to me. I'm a public school teacher. Representative Guthrie has a voting record already of voting to eliminate the Department of Education. He did it in the last Congress with Thomas Massey's amendment, which they jam-packed into a bunch of amendments, and he voted for it. We don't need to eliminate the Department of Education. We don't. Okay, it serves a critical focus in our nation. It serves two critical focuses, actually. One of them you don't hear much, okay, and was brought up Sunday. It ensures that we are treating everybody with respect. We are making sure that everyone has the proper education that they need, regardless of who they are. Okay, and let me give you some stats on education here. Okay, Kentucky gets over $1 billion in federal fundings. Okay, some of the funds include Title I funds, funds for low-income students, $274 million in Kentucky. Over 70% of our Kentucky schools are eligible. I work in 6 of those schools. I work in 6 schools in a week. All 6 are Title I schools. IDEA funds for special education. Kentucky gets $182 million. These funds are used to hire and train teachers, provide assistive equipment, therapy, and support specialized training to make sure that we give our special education students the education they deserve. And then Title IV funds, $35 million. These funds help fund things like art and music, career and technology education, foreign languages, and effective use of technology. Okay, so when you go out to that football game, watching your team, and you're cheering on that high school band that's playing at halftime or playing in the stands, and you love the music that they're playing, some of this money helps them. When you go out and you see an art gallery put on by students in Kentucky, the Department of Education helps fund some of that. When you see the amazing career and tech ed students doing some amazing things, getting job training for when they graduate high school and can go out into the workforce, that is part of that is funded by the Department of Education. Okay, eliminating the Department of Education would eliminate the ability for those funds. Okay, and I just want to tell you, in Warren County, we get 18% of our budget in Warren County from the federal government. And so if the Department of Education is eliminated, the question was asked, how would you ensure funds that schools need to survive are still sent to the schools? So their idea, and Representative Guthrie's idea, is to send those funds to the state and let the state handle it. If you live in Kentucky, you see that our state government, the schools won't see those funds. They won't. Okay, it's going to put that burden back. It will put the burden onto our state government, and our state government already does not need that burden. They have other things that they need to focus on. They will be, for lack of a better word, completely screwed if they're told, find the funds for these schools. The Department of Education is critical to our public schools, and we saw in the last election, every single one of our 120 counties voted to protect our funds for our public schools. Okay? Kentuckians support our public schools. Getting rid of the Department of Education would do nothing but hurt our students in our state. So I don't support it, and I believe that we should ensure that the funds the schools need to survive are still sent through the Department of Education. I don't support eliminating it, but Representative Guthrie does. Okay, and so there were a couple other questions that were asked that I specifically cannot answer because they were just directed towards Representative Guthrie. But I'm going to say this. If you have any other questions you would like me to answer, please feel free to email me at williamcompton, the number 4, ky@gmail.com. That's my email. Email me. I will answer those questions for you. Okay, if you want clarification on one of the questions that I answered today, please email me. Let me answer those questions. Have a conversation with me. And one last thing. If you want to come out and ask a question to me in person, April 5th from 2 to 5 p.m., or 2 to 4, 2 to 4 p.m., I will be holding a town hall in Warren County at the Bob Kirby Library branch. We can hold 300 people, and I want to see all 300 people there because I want to hear from everybody. If you can't make it to that one, April 12th, the next Saturday after that, I will be holding another town hall in Hardin County at the Goodwill Opportunity Center from 1 p.m. Eastern Time to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay, the Warren County one's in Central Time, the Hardin County one's in Eastern Time. So 1 to 3 Eastern Time. Please, if you cannot get out to one of those, I'm going to be hosting more. Unlike Brett Guthrie, I don't hide from answering questions from the people. Thank you all for watching this video. I hope I answered your questions, especially those who asked those questions at the town hall meeting last Sunday. I hope to hear more questions from everybody. Thank you so much. And it was a pleasure to have this conversation with you all.